Hi guys, this is Azure and today we're gonna talk about certain interesting topics which are very less common. So we're gonna go through what is exactly there inside Azure data center, we call it as DC, and how to decide where to deploy your workloads and what Azure services are available in the data centers or in the nearest data centers which you will select from the second particular factor. Hope you enjoy it. So let's get started. So when we talk about Azure data centers, people have doubt what exactly would be there inside particular data center, how it is protected, and how we are able to provision a VM within seconds, and then uh, everything which happens inside it. So let's peep into the Azure DCs or the Azure data center. What exactly is there in it? So Azure data centers would be nothing like when we start from the basic level. So it would be a group of servers which would be hold in a data center. So let's see, there's a single. Usually data centers will be having a single rack server, and single rack servers would be having blades, and these blades would be having servers which would be hosting our virtual machines. So these blades are around 40 to 50 in numbers. So the 40 to 50 in numbers, 40 to 50 blades constitute of a single rack server. And on top of every rack server, there's something called as aggregated switch through which the network flows in. So we have aggregated switch for every service, every single rack service like this. So among these rack servers, there would be virtual machines, and in certain rack server would be dedicated. One of these single rack server would be having FC, called as the fabric controller. So fabric controller controls everything how a VM virtual machine should get provision when a customer requests a new VM, or if something happens to virtual machine like the OS gets corrupt, then how it self heals. FC take case of it. And certain cases when a virtual machine is idle or not used, or when the complete, like in certain cases like virtual machines, like these all are blades or nodes, we can say that. So these all blades would be having would be connected, would be having blades would be virtual machines or the service would be filled up improperly sometimes. Sometimes what happens if this particular blade, if it has a capacity of 50 virtual machines, 50 servers, 50 virtual machines here, then 50 to 100 virtual machines. In that case, if only 45 is filled and the rest 5 are idle, then in that case it would start reallocating the next request onto this particular 5 virtual machines. So there it like dehydration or cleaning happens, and the life cycle of a particular virtual machine will also be it's also a responsibility of fabric controller to take care. So the fabric controller, so we have single rack servers, and among the single rack servers we have a dedicated service which would be having fabric control in it. So when this particular single rack servers, when we bring around 20 single rack servers and keep it in a space, we call them as a single stamp or a cluster. So each single stamp would be having around 800,000 of instances in it running on it. And whenever the users, so what happens is like with this particular the stamp or clusters, there would be multiple stamp or clusters. So when the multiple stamps or clusters are clubbed, that together makes a data center. So one particular things which we would observe or the customer need to have is high availability. That if he had installed his application or provisioned a VM here and installed his application here, then he need to have, or the you need to ensure that his application runs all the time without any downtime. So for that, the Azure takes care of it is like, it's when it says a high availability, Azure says that it will take care of the device failures. If device failures happen, then it will take care. or the scheduled, it will take care of the scheduled maintenance, like if some upgrades are happening. So each server racks are considered to be one fault domain, as I talked in earlier videos, or you can visit to my earlier fault domain videos or update domain videos where I have mentioned what exactly is fault domain. Each server rack is a fault domain. What that means is, if your application is hosted here, if something happens to this server at the network level, like at the aggregated switch at the top, then the total rack would go off. It doesn't mean that you are only affected, but the other applications which are on top of this particular rack server would be affected. So for making this particular so for making this for keeping your availability of your application high, you need to have at least one of the instances in this particular server and run another instances in this particular server. That would make your SLAs up and your application would be uptime. So what they will ensure is, like, if you are maintaining at least two instances of your application on two different servers, how you gonna mention that? You can mention by configuring something called as availability set. So when you say choose an availability set while deploying an application, it would deploy your application in of single, if you're selecting at least two instances of your application, then one, and availability group will make sure, the availability set will make sure that you choose at least two instances, or you have to go two instances of your applications running. So in that case, what Azure would do is, like, it will bring one particular instances and it would keep on this particular first rack, and then it would keep your another instance in its second rack. It can be here or it can be here out of this 20 single server. And your application instances would only be kept in this particular single stamp or cluster if you mention a affinity group. So you understood? So when you mention affinity group, your application gets deployed into a single stamp or cluster in a DC. If you don't mention that, your application can go and can sit in the same or in any other stamps. So what are the disadvantages of keeping your applications, or if it gets hosted in two different stamps? Then if think that if your application, like two different applicate if your two instances of your application, like your want to talk to each other, applications want to exchange data with each other, then in that case, if they are settled in a two different stamp, then the network level congestion can affect the performance of your application, and it can make your application uh, hung for some time, and the user experience would go off. So for high availability, what Azure would for high availability, what user need to do is, like, he need to choose at least two instances and keep it in an availability set. Then the Azure would take care of your application to be SLAs of 99.9% even if the device fails, I mean the rack fails, or even a scheduled maintenance get triggered. Like, this is also server and it runs by OS. There would be planned maintenance which would be triggered. So the planned maintenance would not trigger two server racks in an availability set, or two upgrade domains, or two fault domains in an availability set at a time. It would trigger an update first on this rack, and then it would trigger an update on this rack. That would make sure your application is never down and it's up and running. So how to find nearest Azure DCs to deploy your customer solutions? So in certain cases, like when you have your customers and you have built up your applications, and you have a doubt where to exactly host my application, how to find the nearest DC or nearest data center, so that if my customer is from US and I want to host his applications to my nearest DC in US, then how to find? Let take an example of let's find an example of I stay in India and we are looking for a customer. We have a customer in India and we want to host a solution for him for Indian customers. So in that case, let's go and find the nearest DC. For finding a nearest DC, you need to go to an Azure website which is hosted on Azure itself. and the website name is azurespeedtest.azurewebsites.net. So click on it. So you'll be reaching to the Azure website. Let me refresh this again. So the speed test is starting. So you can see that your web browser will be making ping calls to the blob storage. I'll let you know what exactly is a blob storage. Storage is Windows Azure Service storage, where exactly everything in Azure is hosted, you can say. Like the storage would be having the virtual machine. If you procure the VHD would be stored in your storage. So if we can ping to the storage, the blob storage, then we can make sure that this blob storage would be part of any particular stamp or cluster of a DC. So let's go and check. So you can see the time in millis, the pings replies in milliseconds, and the data centers are, these are 19 data centers which are available, and there are 140 billing centers from where actually 140 countries from where you can create a subscription. So data centers, you can see the East Asia, it says 152 milliseconds is nearest to me. Southeast Asia 157 milliseconds. So like that you can, like as I'm in India, so Southeast Asia and East Asia are there. So we can have the nearest DCs account to this, and we can see the average latency which is taking the ping request, the request to take to to return back the response are 152 milliseconds. So these are not exactly what it is, but yeah, they're approximate values which you get. The speeds are accurate. So once you choose, like check what particular DC you need to host or a region you need to select, like we have selected East Asia, then you would be more interested to what kind of services are there in that particular region. So let's go and check what kind of Azure services are there in this particular region. For this, you need to go to azure.microsoft.com/ENIN/regions, or this, just Google regions, the services, Azure services by regions. You'll get a page like this. You can go back for showing up what are the regions which are available. So you can see the 19 DCs here over the map. So in India, it is around, it is stored in West India, Central India, and South India. So when we select East Asia, it would be the DC would be any of this, because every DC is constitutes of sub areas or suburbs. Like it can be the part of, like China can be part of it, and China, East China, North can be part of it, or East Asia, and Southeast Asia. You have a different region itself, and East Asia would constitute of these particular regions. So let's go to the services which are hosted on this particular region. You can see the products which are available in this American region. Let's check for the Asia specific for which we are interested. And we have virtual machines. Here is a compute which is there, and we have cloud services here, and we have virtual machine skill sets, the networking. These are categories based storages which we have web mobile. The dark spots represent that they are available in this particular region. You can see the East Asia region we would be interested, and you can see the services which are in demand. So whatever the customers, because your customers want to or have those services would be, you can verify once before promising to customer that yeah, you can host in this particular region on Azure by checking this particular page. But what are the benefit if you're like benefit of keeping your services on your nearby DCs? In certain cases, what happens if your customers' applications are multi-tiered applications? In order to multi-tiered applications would be like you'll have different tiers of your applications. The data tier and the application tier layers are separate, and the application layers can be hosted in different in different virtual machines or in different stamps of Azure, or the data tier can be in different stamps of Azure. And if you make the proximity of these resources or layers in nearby DCs, then the time the application layer talks with your data tier or the data layer, the latency you can decrease and the performance of your application can be increased. So for that, you just need to go and make sure that you select an affinity group for this. So once you select an affinity group, Azure will make sure that your resources are co-located in a DC or in nearby DCs or in nearby stamps. That's what for today. Hope you enjoyed it. Do tweet me at the Azure guy 007. I'll be happy to answer your doubts. Thank you.
There's turkey in the oven, the mashed potatoes bubbling, watching football with our family and our friends. We smell the food a-cooking, and Grandpa keeps a-looking. Grandma pushes him out of the kitchen again. The little cousins, they all zoom, screaming loud from room to room. We don't seem to care.